Here's the hottest D&D hot take I've ever had in my entire life. I don't think you or anyone should be critiquing any published online Dungeons and Dragons game, including Critical Role. Keep your fucking comments to yourself. Now that I've said that and people have lost their proverbial minds, let's talk about why. So, that game is a game of those people at the table. Is it broadcast? Absolutely. Can you talk about what you don't like about it, about that kind of stuff? Absolutely. But you have no right to actually talk about the dynamics of the player and the dungeon master. Why is that? Because it's a Dungeons and Dragons game. What works at their table may not work at your table. What they find acceptable, you may not find acceptable. And to pose your dynamics of your table onto another table is completely and totally unethical. You're not at that table. You don't know if those players have a problem with the way someone's acting. You don't know if that dungeon master has a problem. So opposing your opinion of inappropriate or appropriate behavior is wrong. Now, it's a published thing, Richard. It's they're putting it out there for the world to see. Absolutely. But if you open your mouth, you're kind of a jackass because you're not talking about the mechanics of the game. You can talk about rulings. You can talk about things that you would have done better. You can critique it from an entertainment standpoint. Those are all fine and dandy. The problem is the critiques we have are about behavior. You're not at that table. So shut the fuck up. And I mean that in the most disrespectful way possible. Because what's happening is when you critique the way that players are, you're basically imposing your will on how players should behave. Players at my table are completely different than players at your table. I I role play with some of the most ridiculous people out there because I started doing pro bono games for my daughter and her friends and for the public library and for all sorts of different things. So the amount of players that I got of varying degrees were just crazy. And then I was a professional dungeon master online for a while, and holy moly, that was a whole different line of players, which I had a whole different skill set and rules for, and how you'd have to behave in social contract. All of those things make a difference. What you find acceptable as your table as a dungeon master, you have the right to set those rules 100%. You have the right to actually say, hey, this is allowed, not allowed at my table. If you're going to interrupt players, you need to raise your hand. I don't know what your rules are. But my point is that yes, it's an online forum. Yes, we can critique it from an entertainment standpoint, but we need to be very careful about what we feel is appropriate critiquing for a Dungeons and Dragons game, because that means that your opinion on how a table should be run is the only way. So it's just something to be careful of.